Welcome to Trashmagination, a podcast about reimagining trash. I'm Carla Brown. Last month, I was interviewed on the podcast The Sustainable Minimalist, hosted by Stephanie Safarian. It was episode 37 of that podcast, and I encourage you to go listen to that episode because Stephanie is a great interviewer. But in the meantime, I'm going to share some tidbits of what we discussed. To give some context, Stephanie's podcast is for people who are simplifying their lives and learning about minimalism. Now, a stereotype of minimalism is that the main goal is to reduce your possessions and downsize your home. And that can be a big part of the process, but it's just one facet of minimalism. It can also mean simplifying your schedule by learning to say no to commitments and being intentional about how you spend your time and money. Now, Stephanie asked how one might work toward a minimalist lifestyle if you also want to pursue creative reuse as part of an environmentally conscious lifestyle. Just like there are stereotypes about minimalism, there are stereotypes about creative reuse. People imagine that to make items from recycled materials, you have to store crates of recyclables in your home, and that would not seem to align with minimalist goals. So to start, I think it's helpful to clarify why we do creative reuse. There is certainly an artistic motivation in my case, but there are also lots of other goals, such as taking responsibility for the waste that my family produces. Now, my family consumes some products which create trash, which is challenging to recycle through our local municipal recycling programs. And plus, now, many recycling programs for plastics in particular cannot keep up. My family is on a journey to remove those products from our lives, but it is a gradual process. I think that making trash and recyclables into art is a fun way to have a conversation with people about all the trash and recycling that we are producing, rather than just being all doom and gloom and telling people to stop buying all the things they're buying. So then I described the process for how someone could set up a system for creative reuse in their home without overwhelming themselves with crates of recyclables and other trash items. And here were the steps. For step 1, you're going to figure out what you want to collect. For step 2, you're going to store what you collect in a way so you don't forget about it. And then for step 3, you're going to get rid of the collections that you realize you are not going to creatively reuse, either because your interests have changed or you're moving and you can't store those collections anymore. So the first step was how to know what to collect. You look at the trash and recycling items that your family generates. So if some of the products that you buy come in packaging that doesn't compost, and you as a family want to keep buying that item, then you are faced with a dilemma for what to do next. The next step would be to start a Pinterest board and gather ideas for what you could make with that material. The thing is, you may start looking at projects that already exist out in the world for that material, and you may say, none of those projects really inspire me. If none of the projects work for you, you've got another choice, which is you can either think of your own ideas, or you could decide that is not a material that you're going to collect, because there's no point in collecting recyclables or trash that make projects that you don't want to have into your life. Next, you're going to maybe have to learn some skills in order to manipulate the trash and recycling material that you're collecting. And there's not many classes in the world which teach you how to make items from recycled materials, but there are many art and craft and sewing and woodworking, sculpting. There's all sorts of classes that teach you how to manipulate materials. So I look at the trash or recyclable, and then I evaluate what skills could be useful to transform that material. So for example, if the item is flexible, like fabric, maybe I could use skills related to sewing or weaving. And if the material is hard, then maybe I would use skills related to woodworking or sculpture. Anything you make with new art and craft materials can likely be made with recycled materials if you're willing to experiment. And I call this experimentation the material sciences part of the process. The bottom line is you should really only collect trash and recyclables that delight you. I love weaving plastic bags, sewing juice pouches, building little creatures with colorful plastic caps, and quilting with fabric scraps. I love denim, ribbons, and flexible food packaging. But I have learned that I don't love making projects with certain types of plastic containers, wood, cardboard, wine corks, glass, rubber inner tubes. These are all other materials that I could collect and work with, and I did and experimented, but I just found I didn't love working with those materials. I didn't like the tools or the process. However, I do know people who love those materials. I know woodworkers or people who are art teachers or people in maker spaces. I can still collect materials for those people and give it to them. So the next step would be to tell your friends what you are collecting. Because if I only made items from my own trash, I would probably never get anything done because our family doesn't collect enough trash to make the projects that I want to make. When I figure out, I really want to make something from this material, I put the word out, and that way I can gather materials more quickly and actually make the project and then move on. So I'm not waiting months or years in order to make a project. So those were all the steps related to knowing what you want to collect as a research process, finding people who want the collections, that kind of thing. So all the stuff related to deciding what you want to collect. So the next section is how to store materials until you want to use them. The first step is to clean and deconstruct all the materials and make them as small as possible. So for example, my family was eating those clementines out of wooden clementine boxes, so I removed all the staples and got all the pieces to lie flat in a box. For a toothpaste tube, if I wanted to use that material, I would squeeze out all the paste, cut out the bottom and the side, make sure it's nice and clean and dry, and then flatten it. For blue jeans, what I do is I cut the panels of the denim fabric and then roll up the seams and waistbands. This helps you see at a glance whether you have enough of a material to make the project and to ensure that nothing smells or gets moldy. So the next step would be to set maximum collection amounts. And this is one I have trouble with personally because once I start collecting something, I want to just collect it, all the stuff. But what I have come to realize is that once I have filled a box filled with that item, I should stop and then either use that in a project or give away either the whole collection or a subset of that collection to a creative reuse store or artists or teachers, and not just keep collecting that item forever and ever. And then the next step would be to set maximum keep times. So if something has been sitting in my storage for, say, more than a year, I might decide this is it. I'm clearly not inspired by this material. It's time to give it away. And the intriguing part about that is it seems like the day I decide I'm going to give something away, that is when I come up with the perfect project idea to use that material. Something about that deadline, it just unleashes a big creative energy. And then the last recommendation is to store your recyclables or trash that you're going to collect for creative reuse projects, to store them in clear containers. Because if you can see it, then you'll remember you have it and you can be more intentional about using it up. So the last item is that you don't want to have been collecting something for a really long time and have it all clean and everything, and then you decide you don't need it anymore. That seems a little bit sad. And so the good news is many trash and recycling items will have value to other people if they are in large enough quantity, if they are clean, and they are stored very neatly. The places that I tend to bring stuff are creative reuse centers, teachers, or other friends that are making things from recycled materials. But I recently saw a very intriguing post on Facebook on the discussion group called Journey to Zero Waste. This person named Amber Upshaw says that she sells her collections of clean recyclables on eBay, and she showed posts of how she had done this. Her collections were selling for things like this. Like she sold 40 prescription bottles, those little orange bottles. She sold those for $16. Of course, she had cleaned them, taken the labels off of them. She sold 100 baby food jars for $50. She sold 100 empty toilet paper rolls, the little tubes, for $19. She sold 12 Tic Tac containers for $5 and 30 cardboard egg cartons for $12. So it's amazing. But people, when they're making crafts, they want to have it in quantity and they're willing to pay for it. Now, people might want your recycled material collections also if you show how to use the materials. So back in the previous step when you were researching what you were going to collect, you might have done what I suggested, which was to make a Pinterest board of project ideas. And so let's say you've collected this material, you can show the teachers or other people in your life, hey, look, here's a bunch of ideas for what you can make with this material. I've got it all clean and tidy here in this box. Would you like it? And people might be more excited about taking the material and using it with their students if you already have done the project research. And then the last idea is if you have collected a whole bunch of a certain material and you decide you don't really want it anymore, you could use it in an event. So for example, I used to collect a lot of plastic caps and I collected gray caps at a much faster rate than the other colors. It was just the nature of what is made and what is consumed. And so I designed a small robot project using plastic caps. And then I did a tabling event and I drilled a whole bunch of those caps. It was 2,000 caps actually to make 500 robots. And then I went and I made those caps with the kids at the event. And so this just cleared out my entire gray cap collection, which was great because I still liked using the more colorful caps, but I really didn't need to keep using up so much space for the gray caps. And so that's an example of designing around the materials that you have collected. To wrap up this episode, I want to touch on one other topic that Stephanie and I discussed. So many of Stephanie's listeners are interested in simplifying their lives because they are parents and they want to be great parents by focusing on what is most important, even though their family life can be very busy. And this reminded me that I think creative reuse is an important part of parenting. And that's because so many kids are not learning how to make or fix things, and it's causing families to throw things away that they don't need to throw away, which is both expensive and wasteful. So when families do creative reuse projects together, the kids see that they can fix broken items and they can find value in items that many other people throw away. I mean, a lot of schools are no longer teaching subjects such as home economics or woodshop. I think it's incumbent upon families to incorporate that skill sharing in our family life. So thank you very much for listening. I would love to hear what you think about minimalism and creative reuse. You can contact me at trashmagination@gmail.com. And I recommend you check out the podcast where I was interviewed called The Sustainable Minimalist. Until next time, may you build a life that encourages both minimalism and creative reuse.